Welcome to ITV News, Meridian.
Tonight's headlines. Sending in the hit squads. The Prime Minister gets tough on failing schools and tells us why this one's in a class of its own.
What do we want? Fair pay! When do we want it? Now!
Deliver on our pay. Midwives across the south tell us why they joined the picket line, striking for the first time in their history.
Winds of change. The battle of the turbines off the Jurassic coast. Will it become Europe's biggest offshore wind farm?
There was no doubting the enthusiasm of the riders on some very uncomfortable ironmongery.
And getting from A to B, a remarkable insight into life in the south in a bygone age. Good evening to you. The Prime Minister chose Portsmouth today to announce new powers to intervene and improve the South's failing schools.
David Cameron said a national teacher service set up by 2020 would see a so-called hit squad of elite teachers sent into schools to improve lessons, get tough on behaviour and remove struggling teachers.
12 secondary schools in our region are currently graded by Ofsted as inadequate.
They include the Havant Academy, the Bridge Mary School in Gosport, Ferndown Upper in Dorset and 3 schools on the Isle of Wight, the Ryde Academy, Carisbrooke College and Sandown Bay. Dozens more primary schools are also considered to be failing.
Well, Mr Cameron told our social affairs correspondent Christine Alsford that those with long-term problems will be first in line if the Tories win the next election.
It was certainly the most high-profile political playground duty that High Achieving Charter Academy has ever seen. The Prime Minister and the Secretary of State for Education came to this dramatically improved school in Portsmouth today to unveil plans for tough new powers for those at the other end of the scale. They're proposing that where necessary, heads and others could be removed immediately in the worst 500 schools, and they'll train a central pool of expert super teachers to step in where needed.
We shouldn't tolerate failure for schools, year after year, even month after month. We should intervene and intervene early and do things like getting new leadership into schools, more discipline into schools, change the governing bodies if necessary, make the changes that will turn a school round.
Turning this inner city school around has meant academy status and a fresh start. Dame Sharon Hollows has taken it from a school where fewer than a quarter of pupils gained 5 good GCSE grades to one where 4 out of every 5 pupils do well. So what does she think of the idea of removing teachers at the top of struggling schools more quickly?
It may potentially be the right thing for some people to be removed. It really depends on the school and why things are going wrong.
Overall, would you say you support what the government has announced?
I do support what I've heard so far. Sounds like it will give children a better opportunity to learn.
Among those already given a better opportunity to learn here, GCSE pupils Brittany and George. Mixed views from them as to whether taking rapid action is always the answer.
You get year 11s every year, so there isn't much time to be wasting.
The behaviour and the discipline within the school is a lot better. It must have took about 2 years to actually make it become much better.
The main head teacher union says it fears teachers will be put off from wanting to progress at a time when 1/3 of posts in our region currently have to be re-advertised through a lack of suitable applicants. But those backing these new measures, which will feature in the Conservative election manifesto, believe they'll help struggling schools wave goodbye to poor performance for good. Christine Alsford, ITV News.
Well, for more on the Prime Minister's visit and his education plan, then scan this code on your smartphone or tablet to be taken straight to our website, or search for ITV News Meridian on your computer.
Hundreds of NHS workers across the south have been on strike today. Nurses, ambulance staff and for the first time in their history, midwives walked out for 4 hours over pay.
They made sure urgent and emergency care was unaffected, but felt they had to pick it outside their hospitals to show their frustration at not being given a 1% pay rise. Our report comes from Andrew Pate.
They spend their working days helping and supporting others. Now they're asking for the public support, after a call for a 1% pay rise for all staff was rejected. Up at 4 a.m. to help stage this morning's picket, this midwife told us she felt they were left with no other option.
I'm here really with a heavy heart because I never thought in my nursing and midwifery career that I would ever be supporting midwives to come out on strike. And the reason we're here is because we just simply want to be treated fairly.
It's been 33 years since NHS staff last went on strike over pay, and the first time ever for midwives to walk out.
I'm looking out for the future of midwifery. I think we've been pushed around for long enough now, and it's time that we get that 1% pay rise that we were promised quite a long time ago.
In Southampton, like other parts of the south, staff made sure urgent and emergency care wasn't affected by the strike. But for those who work at the Princess Anne Hospital, or who were delivered here, they feel with MPs due to get a 10% pay rise next year, they should see an increase too.
You see examples of staff giving exceptional care every day, going beyond their hours, staying behind. They're looking after a woman in labour particularly, or in the ED department, and actually not to award the 1% pay rise, which was recommended, to then give themselves a 10% pay rise, doesn't actually say that we're all in it together.
The government says it's giving wage increments to some staff, but can't agree to the 1% increase for all, saying, "We cannot afford a pay rise which disproportionately reward the highest earners without risking frontline jobs." Today's walkout will be followed by 4 days of working to rule, starting tomorrow. Andrew Pate, ITV News.
Well, you've been telling us what you think on our Facebook page. Kay Howe from Wiltshire says, "I am all for it. They save lives and get hardly any appreciation. Footballers get paid more than them."
You can say that again. Helen Spanley from Chichester agrees and says they should rethink NHS pay. "I'm a healthcare assistant and get paid the same as a housekeeper."
But Joe Birch from the Isle of Wight doesn't agree, saying, "A lot of us in the private sector have trained for years, worked long hours and had cuts in our wages. Why don't they go and get a different job if they are unhappy with pay?"
Meanwhile, June Saunders from Lymington posted, "My appointment at Southampton was cancelled today, but I'm not bitter. Fight the good fight. You deserve it." Thank you to everyone for all of your comments. In other news, arson is being blamed for a fire which destroyed a disused hotel on the Isle of Wight. The blaze broke out at the derelict Royal Cliff Hotel in Sandown just before midnight on Saturday. No one was inside the building at the time.
Southampton will see the fastest rise in house prices in the country over the next 5 years. That's according to property website Rightmove. It's predicting property values will jump 43% by 2019, taking the average price for a home in the city to more than £320,000. It's predicted Brighton will see a 40% jump in prices.
Meanwhile, Fareham in Hampshire has been named as Britain's most car-dependent town. According to figures from the Office for National Statistics, there are more than 500 cars registered to addresses in the town for every 1,000 people. People in Fareham are more than twice as reliant on their cars as those living in Manchester or Liverpool.
An ice cream van has crashed on a busy dual carriageway in Dorset, sending boxes of lollies and ice cream all over the road. It happened on the Upton bypass at Poole this morning, causing long delays for motorists while the council sent in cleaners. The driver was taken to hospital, but fortunately wasn't badly injured.
You are watching ITV News here in the Meridian region. Thank you so much for choosing us. We appreciate it. Coming up,
an emotional goodbye for sailors from the south as they set sail from Spain for the Volvo Ocean Race.
For more on all of our stories, do head to itv.com/news/Meridian. Any views or news, please call us. 0808 10 10 095 is the number, or get in touch via Facebook, or you can always send us a tweet at ITV Meridian.
Plans to transform parts of the M3 in Surrey and Hampshire into a so-called smart motorway will go on show to the public later this week. It would see the hard shoulder between Farnborough and the M25 junction used as a fourth lane and made available to traffic at particular times of the day.
The creator and writer of wonderful Downton Abbey is set to receive an honorary doctorate from the University of Winchester. Lord Julian Fellows will be given the award as part of a graduation ceremony. He's receiving it in recognition of his national and international work in creative writing and performing arts.
It's nearly 11 minutes past 6 and the ITV News continues with the national and international news at 6:30 with more now. Here's Alistair Stewart.
Testing for Ebola will start tomorrow as government confirms Britain is expecting a handful of cases. London's Heathrow is first, Gatwick and Eurostar follow next week. Specialist hospitals are on standby. No dampening of spirits as thousands of health workers strike over pay for the first time in 30 years. And digging for history but finding a fortune. One man and his metal detector make an important Viking discovery. Join Mary Nightingale and me at 6:30.
Now, love them or loathe them, they're our best-known wind turbines. The one at Reading, just off the M4, and the one near Lewes in Sussex are just the start.
But it's not so much the onshore ones that are creating controversy right now, it's more the big farms planned offshore.
Yep, for more than 2 years now, people have been picking sides in the furious debate over Navitus Bay, which, if it existed now, would be the world's largest offshore wind farm.
Energy giants Eneco and EDF want to build it off the Dorset and Isle of Wight coastlines, where the seabed is part of the Crown estate.
Either 120 or 190 turbines would be put up across an area of sea larger than Bournemouth Pool in Christchurch conurbation.
Well, tomorrow sees the start of the planning hearings, which over the coming weeks will influence whether, or indeed not, the wind farm will be built. In the first of two reports, Martin Dowse now explores the arguments for and against.
It's either a vital step on the path towards our greener energy future that'll keep the lights switched on and boost local jobs and industry, or a blight on one of the country's most beautiful stretches of coastline that'll be with us for a quarter of a century and have a seriously detrimental effect on the tourist economy. On a suitably blustery Isle of Wight coast, the man in charge of making it happen told me why he feels not building Navitus Bay is not an option.
The bottom line is we've got great wind coming off the Atlantic Ocean. The coal-fired power stations are closing down, as are the old nuclear stations. So we need to move forward and have a low-carbon energy infrastructure, and that's why Navitus Bay is so important, plays a significant role in delivering that low-carbon energy infrastructure.
The UK's current target is that by 2020, 15% of our energy should come from renewable sources. It's estimated that Navitus Bay could produce enough electricity to power 710,000 homes, or the equivalent of 8 Bournemouths. But from within that conurbation and beyond has emerged a sizable opposition to the project, which believes that what Navitus Bay will give is not worth what it'll take away.
The proposal from the government is to pay these developers 3 times as much for their electricity as from a standard gas power station. Where's the logic in that when energy costs are rising?
Roy Pointer speaks for an alliance of residents' associations from Christchurch to the Purbecks, representing some 35,000 people whose communities look out to sea.
This project isn't needed for the government to achieve its 2020 renewables targets. But having said that, if you had to stick a pin in a map of the UK, you couldn't pick a more sensitive or beautiful part of the countryside than Navitus Bay.
But there are residents who feel differently. Jeff Williams lives in Poole and has become a fervent pro-Navitus campaigner over the last 2 years.
Navitus will be one step in the right direction to lower the carbon emissions, and the case is overwhelming for climate warming. The ice caps are melting, sea levels are rising. The situation, I believe, is beyond dire.
If Navitus were built, the underground cable bringing its electricity ashore would hit the coastline near New Milton, before heading 22 miles inland through parts of the New Forest and connecting to the Mannington substation near Ferndown to join the national grid. That cable route has brought the New Forest National Park Authority out against the project.
Well, the cable route is planned to go
from the far corner of the field and track over towards the hedgerow in the distance. It's going to be travelling through the woodland that we see over there, and we're concerned about the impact of losing those trees. If you're chopping down a 300-year-old tree, it's not something that you can replace immediately.
But campaigners, Friends of the Earth, believe that in this delicate trade-off between what may be bad for the local area and what may be good for the planet, that the planet takes precedence.
We have to tackle climate change. We have to tackle it as a national emergency. We are an organisation which has always been concerned about protecting the Dorset coast, but we have to choose the least impact development that we can get, the one that gives us the cheapest, most reliable energy for the least impact on the environment. And we think at the moment that the wind farm would be that solution.
Tomorrow we'll explore by far the most controversial aspect of Navitus Bay, its sheer scale and the visual impact it could have on one of our most beautiful coastlines, and the economic impact on our communities. Martin Dowse, ITV News.
Yes,
Yep,
and more
that's
on
gonna
that
run and run.
tomorrow. It is, isn't it? Yeah. Well, in sport, of course, no Premiership or Championship football over the weekend, so a chance for our smaller clubs to shine. Did they? Let's find out. Let's consult the sporting oracle that is Sarah Goll.
Thank you very much, Fred. Yes, the international games meant to break for Premier and Championship teams this weekend, and some of our lower league sides could have been forgiven for wishing they'd had a break too. Despite taking an early lead at home to Peterborough, League One Crawley Town went on to lose 4-1 in a game boss John Gregory described as a harsh lesson. It was a similar story for Oxford United at Cambridge in League Two. The U's went 1-up through Danny Hilton's header, but that was as good as it got for Michael Appleton's side, who eventually conceded 5 goals. A better scoreline at Portsmouth, who had to settle for a point at home to Mansfield. Pompey went a goal down shortly after the break, and Paul Robinson's strike on 70 minutes secured them the draw. In the British Touring Car Championship's final weekend at Brands Hatch, Oxford's Jason Plato won the opening race yesterday, but it wasn't enough to clinch the title, which was won by Colin Turkington, who finished 35 points above Plato. Sir Ben Ainslie launched a charity called the 1851 Trust in Portsmouth today. The Duchess of Cambridge is a patron, and the charity aims to inspire young people to take up sailing and marine engineering, while Sir Ben aims to bring the America's Cup back to Britain for the first time since 1851. As part of the launch, 70 school children painted boats on the wall outside the Ben Ainslie Racing headquarters. Most were looking forward to meeting their hero.
He's a gold medal Olympic sailing person. He's won in the American Cup once. He's like a really good painter.
I'm going to be trying a little bit of painting in a minute, but it's really the start for us launching the 1851 Trust, which is all of the really good parts about the America's Cup project that we can bring to this local area in terms of getting young people into sport and onto the water.
And staying with sailing now, the Volvo Ocean Race is into its second day, and the sailors from the South Coast competing with the all-female Team SCA took a surprise lead during the early stages. They are now in 5th place, just 6 nautical miles off the race leader, while Hampshire's Ian Walker on board Abu Dhabi is in 2nd place. Sally Simmons was on shore to watch them set off.
ITV Meridian Sports Report, sponsored by WeWantAnyCar.com, the Cash for Cars website.
By the time crews next meet their loved ones, thousands of miles will have been sailed in cramped conditions in every kind of weather. It'll be weeks before Molly sees her dad, before Reuben sees his mum.
He'd much rather come with us, but at least he understands what we're doing, so that's nice.
Yeah, it's really tough. It's probably the hardest part of it this morning, leaving these ones behind.
Dockside departure day is tough for parents and children. Private moments thrust in the spotlight as 22,000 poured into Alicante to wave goodbye. 7 teams set sail in this, the 12th Volvo Ocean Race, which started in Portsmouth back in 1973. On a calm day like this, it's hard to believe anything can go wrong. But sailors have lost their lives in this event. And the skipper of Brunel, Val Becking, entering his 7th race, knows the dangers that lie ahead.
Of course, the worst thing I think what can happen is losing a fellow team member. Knock wood, I never experienced myself. But we know as well people have been sinking. I've abandoned about in the previous races who sunk a couple of hours later. So there are a few dangers around.
The first all-female crew for over a decade are hoping to fly the flag for everyone who wants to follow their dream.
I guess in a way you do feel like you're a bit of a role model to people, and some of the comments that, you know, people, especially when they jump on the boat and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you're going to live in this place, or that you do what you do, and I wouldn't change places with you for the world. So I think you realise what you're doing is pretty special.
Their dream has definitely started. Sally Simmons, ITV News, Alicante.
It'll be good to see those pink ladies in the lead again, wouldn't it?
Exactly, and more inspirational women coming up now. Sarah, thank you.
Thanks, Sarah, very much. Yes, indeed, more than 400 women have celebrated their successes at the annual Women of the Year Awards in London. It is the 60th year the event has been held.
And as David Wood reports, organisers say it's still as relevant in the 21st century as ever. A report does contain some flash photography.
It's a business lunch with a bit of a difference and added glamour, as hundreds of women come together to celebrate their individual success. Among those being recognised is Dawn Elson, who's head of engineering at Gatwick Airport.
It's an amazing privilege to be here today. When I joined engineering some 25 years ago, there was about 7% females in engineering. It's now not even reached 10%. So my expectation was, as you said, that it would go on and increase, but it's just not the case. So having role models to show girls what can be done and the breadth of possibility there is in engineering is really important.
This year we have 6 awards, each recognising the accomplishments of an exceptional woman.
450 women were invited to the lunch, and among the business leaders and charity campaigners there was a Thatcher and a shepherdess, as well as the odd celebrity.
Being able to have that sort of power in order to speak up for those that may not have that platform, I think is an incredible opportunity. So to be surrounded by other women that are doing amazing, inspiring things, that have built their own platforms for themselves, is exactly where I would like to be and exactly where I hope to go.
The ceremony also honoured the achievements of child education activist Malala Yousafzai, who last week was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. And after 60 years of these lunches, organisers say they are still important. In the 21st century, is this still relevant?
I think it's really relevant to celebrate the achievements that women are making right across the board, whether it's internationally or in our communities. Being able to be recognised for what they're doing, I think, is fantastic, and recognised by women who are also doing fantastic things.
Those here acknowledge a lot has changed over the years in terms of women's role in society, but they still intend to celebrate women's achievements for another 60 years. David Wood, ITV News.
And congratulations to our local winners. Now, the last 100 years have seen some extraordinary advances in how we get from A to B, and many of those developments have been caught on camera.
Indeed, yes. Newsreels just released by British Pathé give a remarkable insight into life in the 20th century, and indeed what it was like to live here. Rachel Hepworth has been digging through its archive.
The last part goes into the last Spitfire. The 5 years' work of No. 1 Civilian Repair Unit at Cowley, Oxford, comes to an end.
1945 and an historic moment, the switch from making wartime planes to another industry, which will change the face of Cowley forever.
If the missus doesn't fancy a fighter plane in the empty garage, tell her to sit tight, for here they come. Britain's post-war cars, exclusively photographed by Pathé cameramen. A sight for war-weary eyes. Cars, cars and more cars.
And what better to drag behind your new car than one of these?
Henley-on-Thames. Some people like messing about in boats, others prefer caravanning. Well, now they can do both in the same vehicle. It's the Crichton Gull, an amphibious caravan. He's got the best of both worlds in this roadworthy houseboat. At about £760, anyone can be king of the river or the road. Comes in pretty useful in the rainy season, too.
But for those with a bit more energy,
Leg power came into its own in the Bournemouth area for the Soapbox Grand Prix. The several 1964 models, each with a team of 12 drivers, competed in a race from Christchurch to Poole. Push starting was allowed, but the police insisted on them getting away individually to avoid traffic trouble. It was a novel idea, raising money and amusing a lot of people.
As did these vintage enthusiasts cycling between London and Brighton in 1969.
But there was no doubting the enthusiasm of the riders, who were prepared to brave freezing weather on some very uncomfortable ironmongery from an age when pneumatic tyres were a luxury rather than a rule. How to get high on a penny farthing.
And it appears they rather like a drink in Brighton.
Now and again it so happens that some roisterer isn't in a fit state to drive home, so what's to be done? It's quite simple. Just put through a call to the Tipsy Taxi service and leave it to them. Every good barman knows the number. They'll not only take the fella home, they'll drive his car back for him. So let's have the ignition key, old chap, and your troubles are over.
But for those more steady on their feet, roller power was the answer at this warehouse in Berkshire.
Sorry, didn't see the traffic lights.
Rachel Hepworth, ITV News, in 1964.
You've got to love the commentary,
I
Fred.
love it.
Yes, I thought you would. And tomorrow, more of an insight into life in years gone by, from the elephants of Windsor Safari Park. Remember that place? It's Legoland now. And why are they wearing earmuffs? I don't know. Through to the Smith family of Southampton in their large numbers. That's tomorrow's programme.
But right now, Simon Parkin.
And speaking of large, you remember last week I went to see a pumpkin.
You did.
This whopper of a pumpkin. Oh, no, not that whopper of a pumpkin. That whopper of a pumpkin.
Yes.
Grown by Ian and Stuart Patton in the New Forest. Well, this weekend it was verified to have broken the record for being Britain's heaviest vegetable, weighed in at a whopping 1,884 pounds. That's nearly a tonne. So congratulations to Ian and Stuart.
Well
but other big things growing too. Have a look at this. This is Anita's dad's carrot that was grown in Broughton in Hampshire. Brace yourself, look. 5 foot in length, that one. And here
What's
is...
he doing behind that door?
Who knows? Don't ask. Amy Merrill Howarth's tomato, which was growing in her garden until it got too big and broke off the plant. Just to give you a bit of perspective, that's the normal tomato, and that's what that one looks like. But unexpected growths are still coming in, so keep them coming. Meridian weather at ITV.com if you've got anything larger than it ought to be.
And the weather, pretty awful.
Yeah, worse than it ought to be.
Worse than it ought to be. Here he is, Simon Parkin.
That's us driving on, us driving off in France, and us on the bridge.
Driving to Europe. Eurotunnel Le Shuttle sponsors ITV Meridian weather.
Well, you know, you're in for some wet weather when it's umbrellas that are falling out of the sky, with more than our fair share of rain following on behind. All to do with low pressure moving across us today. There's another lot out to the west that's going to push some rain our way later in the week as well. But we are about to enter a slightly drier spell. Through tonight, things will turn a bit more patchy as far as the rain goes. Then we'll be largely dry tomorrow, and then it's as we head into Wednesday that the next lot of rain arrives. But it is going to be generally unsettled, and we still have that weather warning in place for the rain until midnight tonight. But as I say, a lot of the rain will be light and patchy, a few heavier bursts here and there. Clouds staying with us through the night, hence it's a mild one, 10 or 11 the overnight low. Now, come tomorrow morning, might be a bit misty and murky to begin with, and certainly a bit damp and drizzly too, but a lot of the rain will fizzle away through the morning. By the afternoon, a lot of dry weather, maybe even a hint of brightness here and there, but still not feeling terribly warm. 13, 14 your high. High tide times you can see in Portland, 10:45 in the morning, then around 11:15 in the evening. Then Wednesday starts off dry, but more rain will turn up later.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle sponsors ITV Meridian weather.
And that's how we look tonight. In just a moment here on ITV, we have the national and international news with Alistair Stewart and Mary Nightingale.
Join me if you can for our late news, but for now, from the team here at ITV Meridian, thank you so much for watching. We really do appreciate it. Take care.
Bye-bye.